When you're going through the internet, many tax attorneys' websites say things like former IRS agent, it's a special superpower. But here's what they don't tell you. Not all IRS experience is created equal, and some of it might actually be a disadvantage. I'm Andrew Bosterman, and yes, I am a former IRS agent, also now a tax attorney representing taxpayers before the IRS. And today, I'm going to tell you the truth about what IRS experience actually means for your case. So full disclosure, I spent a few years as an IRS revenue agent before going into private practice resolving taxpayers. So I could sit here and tell you that IRS experience is this amazing advantage and you should definitely hire me because of it. But that would be somewhat misleading because the truth is actually more nuanced. Some IRS experience is incredibly valuable. Some of it is irrelevant to your case, and some former IRS employees make terrible taxpayer representatives. So let me break down what you should actually look for when someone advertises their IRS background and what questions you need to ask if their IRS experience matters. Now, first you should understand that former IRS can mean 1,000 different things. The IRS employs tens of thousands of people, and many of them never interact with taxpayers. They're IT specialists, accountants, managers, customer service reps. But when it comes to tax controversy work, say things like IRS audits, appeals, collections, litigation, the relevant IRS positions you should know are number one, revenue agents. And this was my role I had at the IRS. These are people who conduct audits, primarily of businesses and complex tax returns. We examine books and records, determine tax liabilities, and issue audit reports. Revenue officers, these are different than agents, but they are the IRS collectors. So they work on unpaid tax liabilities, conduct collection interviews, issue levies, negotiate payment arrangements, and essentially deal with everything involving collecting the tax after it's been assessed. Appeals officers, these people work in the IRS Independent Office of Appeals, reviewing cases after examination or collection action, and they often have settlement authority. IRS counsel attorneys are sometimes they're in the office of chief counsel is what it says, but attorneys that work for the IRS, these are the lawyers who represent the IRS in tax court and provide legal advice sometimes to other IRS employees on the front lines doing work. There's also some roles called tax compliance officers or other similar terms, and these roles handle simpler cases, things like correspondent audits, office audits. So that's a broad overview, but when someone says former IRS, your first question should be, what exactly did you do at the IRS? If you're a revenue agent who examined complex business returns, that's very different than someone who spent 2 years in customer service answering phone calls or handled collection cases. Not necessarily better or worse, but just different and might probably not related to your complicated audit defense. So what are the legitimate advantages of working at the IRS? Advantage number one, you understand IRS culture and psychology. Like any business, the IRS has a culture, a way things are done, and how easy or hard it is to get things done internally. You know how to navigate the system, which is definitely very helpful. That's number two, the Internal Revenue Manual. So that's the IRS's internal procedure manual. Thousands of pages on guidance on how the IRS actually works. When an IRS employee is doing something they're not supposed to, an experienced IRS employee can cite the IRM and know when the agent is doing something wrong and can push back on it. Advantage number three, you know what documentation actually matters. So after examining many tax returns, I know what the IRS is looking for in documentation. What's sufficient, what's marginal, what's going to get rejected, what's going to get pushed back on. Oftentimes, I can look at a client's documentation and say, hey, the IRS is probably going to challenge this. Here's what we need to fix, or here's what we need to be prepared for. Advantage number four, you understand realistic timelines and workflows. I know how long it takes appeals to review a case, how long revenue agents are going to take to get back to us oftentimes. That helps set realistic expectations for clients. And I oftentimes know when to push the IRS or when to hold back and just be patient. And five, the fifth advantage, relationships and credibility. So this actually matters less than most people think, but occasionally it matters because there is turnover with IRS employees. And for example, I was a IRS agent in Cincinnati, Ohio, but now I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's not like I know many people at the IRS office here in Charlotte, but being a tax attorney, I oftentimes interact regularly with the IRS attorneys who go to tax court. So I'm able to develop a rapport, or at least a great working relationship with those attorneys I keep seeing over and over again. Now, there's a number of limitations and downsides to being an IRS employee. The first one is that IRS Experience doesn't necessarily teach you how to be an advocate. As a revenue agent, I was an advocate for the government, but being an advocate for a taxpayer is very different. Limitation number 2, IRS Experience can be outdated. How much has changed since that individual left the IRS? Things like, as a revenue agent, I was a revenue agent about 15 years ago, and internal workings at the IRS technology, some of that has changed, but the experience of having to audit someone, dealing with interpersonal skills of people who don't really want to be seeing you or who are upset they're being audited, all of those skills are critical and still can be applied in my work today. But someone that had a very technical role, that could be obsolete. Limitation number 3, the wrong IRS experience can be irrelevant. So if you're facing a complex tax court case and your representative's IRS experience was answering phones at the IRS, that probably doesn't help you. Limitation number 4, sometimes this can create tunnel vision. So the way things were done at the IRS isn't always necessarily the right way. Sometimes you have to push back against IRS procedures, go to tax court, whatever it takes to defend your client properly. Limitation number 5, not all IRS employees were good at their job, and this is just the truth, and that some IRS agents were mediocre or incompetent, so maybe they left because they were pushed out, unsuccessful. There's lots of reasons. So just because someone worked at the IRS doesn't necessarily mean they were good at it. So when you're talking to a tax attorney who advertises IRS Experience, here are the questions you should ask. So the first one is, what specifically did you do at the IRS and for how long? Question number 2, when did you leave the IRS? Question number 3, what types of cases did you work on at the IRS? Question number 4, how many cases have you handled since leaving the IRS? Question number 5, can you give me an example of how your IRS experience helped you in a recent case? And question number 6, how do you approach cases differently than you would have as an IRS employee? So this gives you the whole gamut of the representative's experience and how they are using their experience to help you when they represent you. So ask all those questions when you're evaluating a potential tax attorney hire. Here's my honest kind of wrap-up take as someone with IRS experience. My time as a revenue agent definitely gives me advantages. I understand IRS procedures, I can read IRM citations, I know proper documentation, how to read books and records, reviewing tax returns, and I understand the psychology of the agents I'm negotiating with. But here's what matters more. My experiencing representing hundreds of taxpayers since leaving the IRS. My admission to practice before all 3 federal courts that hear tax cases. The continuing education and staying up to date on what I do on current tax law and IRS procedures, my track record of results for my clients, and my ability to think strategically and advocate aggressively. So the IRS experience is just one tool in my toolbox, but it's not the whole toolbox. And honestly, if I personally were hiring a tax attorney, I'd probably rather hire someone who's never worked at the IRS but has 20 years of tax controversy experience than a former IRS agent who was an agent for 1 year and then is now representing people in their first year of representation. So what matters is competence as a whole, not just where you used to work. So when you see former IRS agent on the website, don't let that be necessarily a deciding factor. It can weigh in the favor, but make sure to ask all the questions I gave you, but also evaluate their current experience and ask about their track record. So, in summary, yes, I'm a former IRS agent, but that's not why you should hire me. You should hire me because I've been representing taxpayers in complex IRS disputes in multiple different factions since leaving the IRS as a CPA, as an attorney at a larger firm, and now as the founder of Boss Tax Law. And I'm also admitted to practice in tax court, and I actually represent taxpayers in cases in court. And my CPA and revenue agent background helps me understand accounting issues, how to read books and records and documentation, and ultimately getting good results for clients. If you want to discuss your IRS issue with someone who understands both sides of the table, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to schedule a consultation. My website is bosstaxlaw.com, and I have more resources there for you to help in your tax controversy case. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.